In this episode, the 7 key ideas from the finance section of The End of the World is Just the Beginning by Peter ZEIHAN. When most of the people watching this episode think of the financial world, they think of post-World War II era globalized finance. But in the long span of history, this Bretton Woods era is the blink of an eye. And yet in this era, we've seen the entire world grow from most people concerning themselves with sustaining life to concerning themselves with lifestyle. We've seen China rise from near irrelevance to being considered by hedge fund billionaire Ray Dalio to be the next leader of the world order. So what is it about the last few decades that has made so much growth possible? That is what this section of Peter ZEIHAN's newest book explains. The first key idea is the evolution of money. Finance started out with slow and limited ways to circulate value, things like barter, then barley, shekels, and precious metals. Eventually, portability and security issues pressed finance to evolve to promissory notes against those precious metals. And now, most abstract of all, we have fiat currency backed by nothing. This ease of transaction has accelerated economic growth and allowed nations to paper over problems by printing more money.
After what is literally the longest running and the biggest expansion of debt really in modern history.
This excess money printing leads us to the second key idea from this book, and that is that countries printing fiat are incredibly distant from the actual value of their money. While this is enabling global industrialization, it is doing so without a foundation of real financial value. America's gold-backed dollar system could not expand the gold supply fast enough to keep up with American money supply expansion. So in the 1970s, Richard Nixon cut the gold standard and began the world of fiat dollars. Post-1971, Asian countries no longer needed gold-backed foreign currency and were able to expand their own money supplies to push toward rapid industrialization. Asian industrialization was assisted by several forces, including American outsourcing, robust and stable foreign demand for exports, and the aggressive adoption of fiat currency while using legal and cultural barriers to discourage foreign penetration into Asian finances, especially China's.
So the question is really then, how bad is the debt problem? And it's a complete black box.
Peter ZEIHAN writes that China's internal unification has cost 40 million lives in Mao's Cultural Revolution. And the Chinese government will continue to spend and print money at any cost to maintain the economic growth necessary to legitimize the Chinese Communist Party. For a thorough look at China's finances, you can check out my recent video on China's Great Wall of Debt by Dinny McMahon, and I'll put a link to that in the description. The third key idea is that financial risk is exploding. Post-1971, in a world where currency is backed by no value, financial risk is supported by default. There is no incentive to hold fiat currency. For example, look at the events leading up to 2008, the development of mortgage origination companies and ninja loans, that's short for no income, no job, or assets. And while regulations are developed to prevent excessive risk-taking, the incentives of a fiat system are too great not to take financial risks. The fourth key idea is the inversion of the demographic pyramid. The retirement of the baby boomer generation is a huge financial issue. The metaphor here is a pyramid scheme. A normal demographic chart has many young people at the bottom who are working, consuming, and paying taxes to cover the needs of the retirees as those people die off. But just like a pyramid scheme, this works well when more and more new people are brought to the base of the pyramid. But what happens in a pyramid scheme when new people stop coming in? And what happens in a financial system when the pyramid is inverted and there aren't enough young taxpayers to offset the costs of an enormous generation of retirees? Ultimately, this can crush an entire financial system. The fifth key idea is that in response to all this, we will see more populism. If fixed income retirees are facing inflation and other financial pressures while their pensions are failing, they will respond. For example, look at recent American politics and the rise of populist leaders and those who promise that the government will take care of everything for you. And remember, retirees don't pay income tax, but they still vote on tax policy, and they will be highly incentivized. The sixth key idea is that inflation will continue, but that's not the whole story.
We're going to have some significant inflation for several years. That is unavoidable, even with good planning.
Yes, inflation is on the rise, but oddly, America's inequality may prevent the most jarring financial shifts from actually occurring. At the time of retirement, most people need to start liquidating assets. The exception is the rich. In the USA, the richest 1% control half of all assets. If they are so rich, this may prevent them from needing to liquidate. The metaphor here is a game of Monopoly. When your properties don't generate income to pay for landing on Boardwalk, you have to sell off your properties. But what if you already own Boardwalk? And maybe you've heard that the rich don't sell assets, and in many ways that's true. Why would a rich person sell assets and pay capital gains tax on that sale when they can simply borrow against their assets? Eventually, the rich pass their assets on to loved ones or charities, again preventing a sell-off. The result may be that the inequality apparent in America's richest asset holding, 1%, may actually serve as a stabilizing economic force. Before we get to Peter Zeihan's final point on how this all plays out, let's recognize that this is one section of one book from one man's point of view. To get another angle, where should we look next? The History of Money by Jack Weatherford? Or a deep dive into Zeihan's section on the other half of the global connectivity question, the transport section of The End of the World is Just the Beginning? Comment below. Zeihan's finance section concludes that through all of this, we can see that financial innovation in the post-World War II era has abstracted us from the real value in money, and a reckoning is coming. The seventh key idea to take from this section is that this may be the end of capitalism. Zeihan explains that systems like communism and capitalism are tools for managing capital. Just as communism can spring up and go away, capitalism can too.
How you manage an economy determines who is who in your society, and that is worth fighting for. So I can see us having conflicts internal and multi-state over how economics works now that we are in a world of less.
And in a world where the pie is shrinking, a capitalist system built on an assumption of constant growth may not last. Those are the 7 key ideas from the finance section of The End of the World is Just the Beginning by Peter Zeihan. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe.